Rules and boundaries are everywhere, from traffic laws, school rules, and dress codes at work, to even the way lines work at the grocery store. But the one place we rarely learn about boundaries is ourselves. If we're lucky, we have an awesome family that teaches us the basics, and then we adjust as we go through life. But for most people, that's not the case. We're left trying to figure it out the hard way. And in my case, I grew up in a deeply dysfunctional family, one with almost no boundaries at all. So today, we're going to talk about something most of us were never really taught: how to create, communicate, and maintain healthy boundaries. But before we dive in, let me make something very clear. This is not about teaching you how to become selfish. A ton of videos out there push that idea, but that's the other extreme. Usually that kind of message comes from people who've been walked all over. And because they never learned how to set healthy boundaries, they swing to the opposite side. But let's be honest. It's very easy for anyone to say, fine, I'll just become selfish. That's the quick fix. But selfishness is the lazy way out, because thinking only about yourself doesn't take any real skill or effort, and it definitely doesn't create healthy relationships. Setting healthy boundaries is harder, yes, but it's also what makes you powerful, because it means you know your worth, you respect yourself, and you also know how to respect others. So without further ado, let's get into it. Firstly, what are boundaries? Healthy boundaries specifically. The best definition I've come across is this: healthy boundaries are the limits and rules you set around your time, your emotions, your body, your mental health, and even your material possessions, so you can stay grounded, comfortable, and at peace. Think of them as borders you create to protect yourself from being used, drained, or manipulated. A common misconception is that people confuse boundaries with standards. And while they might overlap, they're not the same thing. Boundaries are the foundation, the minimum level of respect and protection you set for yourself, the non-negotiables. Standards, on the other hand, are built on top of those boundaries. They're the higher expectations you hold for the kind of treatment, relationships, and life you want. But without healthy boundaries first, your standards don't have solid ground to stand on. That's why boundaries are so important. They're the bare minimum that keeps you safe. All right, warriors. Now that we've cleared up what boundaries really are, here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll break it down into 3 powerful steps. First, how to create boundaries. Second, how to state them with clarity and confidence. And third, how to maintain them. Because boundaries only matter if you can hold them. Now, grab a pen and paper, because we're going to start with how you actually create boundaries in different areas of your life. The first one is physical boundaries. These have to do with your personal space, your safety, your comfort, and even physical intimacy. So ask yourself, how close can someone stand next to you before it feels uncomfortable? Are you okay with a coworker touching your shoulder during a chat, or does that cross the line? When it comes to dating, how soon do you feel comfortable with physical intimacy? Is kissing okay during the first date? And with your kids, who gets to hug them or pick them up? Of course, you can think of and write as many questions as you like, and you can edit your answers as you go through many experiences. But for now, we will stick to some sample and basic questions. The next type of boundaries we need to cover are material boundaries. Ask yourself, do you let people borrow your stuff, like clothes, books, or even your car? Or is that a no-go? In shared living situations, this becomes extra important. For example, if you go grocery shopping and your roommate takes whatever they want from the fridge without asking, that's a boundary violation. If they use your shampoo, conditioner, or cotton pads and go through large amounts without telling you, that's also crossing a line. If they are messing with your workspace or desk, that's a boundary violation. If they are using your cleaning supplies or toiletries excessively without asking, that's crossing a limit. The key here isn't the cost of the items. It's about respecting what belongs to you and asking before using anything. There are 2 main things to keep in mind. First, it's absolutely okay to decide what items you're willing to share, no matter who is asking. Second, it's just as important to consider how your things are treated while they're in someone else's hands, and when and how they will be returned. I know this may sound selfish because from as early as we can remember, we are taught to share, care, and tend to the needs of others. Some of us are even taught that putting the needs of others before our own is the best path to being a good person and having happy relationships. While sharing is super kind, generous, and sometimes absolutely necessary, many women learn the hard way that giving everything to others without prioritizing their own needs actually leaves them exhausted, drained, and resentful. That's why material boundaries matter. They're not about being greedy, they're about respect. They also teach others to be more mindful, considerate, and responsible. Making it clear that you're not okay with people taking your groceries or not returning borrowed items isn't being difficult. It's modeling respect, and respect is what healthy relationships are built on. Then we have emotional boundaries. These are all about protecting your feelings. They help you decide what interactions, comments, or behaviors you're willing to accept from others. Emotional boundaries cover things like how you like to be spoken to, what kind of jokes you find hurtful or offensive. For me, it can be someone laughing about my appearance, how you respond when someone tries to manipulate your feelings or guilt trip you, inappropriate questions or topics that make you uncomfortable, how you deal with constant interruptions while you're speaking, how you handle negative comments about your life choices, how you respond when a person minimizes your feelings by saying things like, "You're overreacting," or "It's not a big deal." Emotional boundaries can be really hard to set. Many of us end up apologizing too much or explaining ourselves over and over, just to justify why we feel upset. I recently found myself in a situation where my sibling made this massive, unnecessary intervention in my life, even questioning my character, just because I chose not to work while studying. Instead of holding my ground, I ended up over-explaining and apologizing for my decision. Honestly, that whole conversation could have been avoided if I had set clear boundaries from the start, because it all began with little jealous comments that slowly grew bigger. I basically put myself in a position where I was defending my personal choices, even things like how my partner and I handle our finances, which is literally nobody's business if it doesn't affect them. Of course, not everyone is toxic or out to hurt you, but it's important to notice when you express a boundary and it's not respected, because once you've made it clear and the other person still ignores it, that's a red flag. We'll dive deeper into that in part 2, especially how to deal with the guilt that often comes up when we start putting our own boundaries first. Next, let's talk about time and energy boundaries. These are all about how you spend and manage your time, and how you protect your emotional energy from being drained. When it comes to these boundaries, ask yourself, how much time do you need for yourself per day? How much time do you have for others? What are your priorities? I would suggest you to try putting the most important thing for you first in your day when your energy is at its peak. If that's not possible, make a hierarchy and dedicate more time to your top priorities. Another question to ask is, how do you handle interruptions in your schedule? What about last-minute plans or cancellations? Are you okay with adjusting on the fly, or does it drain you? How do you feel when someone is late, or when plans change at the last minute? Are you always the one covering the distance and spending extra time to meet a friend, or is it mutual? Is someone endlessly asking for favors? Next, think about your energy. How much can you give without feeling drained? For example, how much time can you realistically spend on the phone listening to a friend who keeps breaking up and making up with the same person? Or imagine a friend or family member calling you to share the latest crisis or relationship drama without asking if you're available first. And of course, the same goes for you. A simple approach is to say, "Hey friend, are you available? I'm feeling emotional at the moment and I'd like to have a conversation." If the other person isn't available emotionally, that's okay. We can't expect someone to always show up for us. Many times, these boundaries get blurred, calls in the middle of the night, or being asked to deal with emotional stress without warning. For example, in my family, there was often a lot of emotional dumping on me without ever asking if I was okay first. I cut it off simply by saying, "I can't talk about this at the moment." Of course, there are times when our people truly need us, and being there can be really supportive and meaningful. The key difference is that it's not about constant emotional dumping, but about genuine moments when someone is struggling and we can be their safe place. Another type of boundary to consider is what I call mental boundaries. This has to do with your thoughts, values, opinions, and beliefs. It's completely normal and human to have thoughts or beliefs that are different from others, even from people you care about the most. Mental boundaries basically mean two things: allowing yourself to hold your own opinions and beliefs, even if they differ from those around you, and also protecting yourself in relationships where your thoughts, values, or beliefs are constantly rejected or dismissed. In those cases, it's important to set a boundary and shift the dynamic. Violations in this category look like not allowing someone to disagree with you or trying to force your opinion or belief to be the right way. Remember, we all have different ways of thinking, and healthy relationships can exist even when we disagree. Then we have financial boundaries. These are all about how you spend and control your money, and how you protect yourself from feeling taken advantage of. For example, how much money are you willing to lend? Do people ask you for specific gifts or expect you to spend in a certain way? Do you give your child an allowance, or do you have a shared budget instead? Are there limits, or do they keep asking for more? How much are you comfortable spending on a group trip or vacation? If you live with a roommate, what happens if they want the air conditioning or heating on all day, but you're paying half and it's increasing your bill? If friends want to go out or take trips that exceed your budget, are you okay with joining? Are you comfortable sharing or discussing your income? Financial boundaries are also something I've struggled with a lot. For example, my sister often wanted to buy expensive gifts for family members or her boyfriend, but she didn't want to pay for them on her own. So she'd ask me to contribute. And instead of just saying no, especially during times when money was really tight for me, I felt morally obligated to say yes. Totally wrong move. A gift is personal. You choose it based on your taste, your budget, and what you want to give. Setting financial boundaries is tricky because everyone has different circumstances. Some people suggest things without even considering that you might not have the same budget. Maybe for you, it feels more doable to go on coffee dates instead of brunch or fancy dinners all the time. Or maybe you'd rather order a soda instead of an overpriced cocktail, and then feel pressured when your friend says, "Really? That's all you're getting?" As if it's boring. The truth is, many people take things for granted that are not at all guaranteed for others. And growing up in a family with a very low budget, there were days in my teens when my parents didn't even have money to give me to go out. I experienced this firsthand. So don't be ashamed to set boundaries in this area, even if others think you're being cheap, boring, or no fun. At the end of the day, real friends hang out with you because of who you are, not because of how much you spend. A walk around the block can be just as fun and way less stressful than cramming into some overpriced bar or club. The next type of boundaries you need to have are privacy boundaries. Ask yourself, what topics are off limits for you? What are you okay with your mom telling her friends? Or what are you okay with friends posting online? Privacy matters are so important that I actually need to make a separate video just about them. So if you'd be into that, just write in the comments down below, Privacy Queen, and we will talk about this soon. And that's a wrap for today, warriors. We covered so much about creating boundaries: physical, emotional, time, material, financial, mental, and privacy. And I know this may sound like a lot, but don't stress. This is not a checklist you have to follow like a robot. These are just ideas to help you think about some key areas in your life. And of course, as you move through life, you'll adjust your boundaries or even discover new ones that fit your situation better. So we talked about what boundaries are, but just knowing your boundaries is pointless if you don't know how to communicate and maintain them. I didn't want to make this video an hour long, so that's coming in part 2. Make sure you don't miss it. If you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to catch the next part. It's time to unleash your inner confident goddess. See you in the next video, warrior.